Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. Today we're going to be talking to you about the Cloud Audit Mercia release, the UK company Cloud Audit Mercia release. My name is Tom Jeffrey. I'm one of the Education and Media Technicians here at Caseware UK, and I'm joined by Matt Swan, our Smart Engagement Product Owner. So Matt's going to be taking you through the presentation today, and I'll be on hand if you have any questions. So your questions will come through to me and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Before I hand over to Matt to start the presentation, I'll just mention that due to the number of delegates, we won't be using the hand-raising feature today. So if you have any questions, please enter them into the question facility on the GoToWebinar control panel. I'll also mention that we're recording this webinar, so that will be made available on the knowledge base. And depending on how many questions we have, we will accompany that with a Q&A document. So that's all from me at this stage. I'll hand you over to Matt to get started.
Thanks, Tom. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us on this webinar. To start off with, I'm just going to run through the agenda just to give you an idea of what we'll be covering, and then we'll start working our way through an actual live product element, so you'll be able to see how the navigation works. As far as the agenda is concerned, we'll be looking at features such as the navigation of the interface, because it is a brand new interface to a lot of our users and to any new potential users to Caseware Cloud. We'll run through the navigation as a starting point. We'll look at a prepared by client element. So this will allow us to go through, request information from the clients, but it will also allow us to automatically file that within our audit file. So we'll be able to request information and store that automatically within the audit file. We'll also be able to use the information that we gathered through this prepared by client to help us with the planning side and respond to individual procedures as we work our way through. We'll be looking at how to bring your trial balance data into the file, and then we'll be giving you an introduction to the checklists. Quite a lot of the template is built on the back of these checklists, and so we'll be looking into how we can go through and tailor a checklist, whether that's switching on questions, switching off questions, or just generally editing the actual text within the questions themselves. We'll show you some of the analysis elements, so quite a lot of the visualization aspects within the product. And we'll also look at starting to build up the risk reporting side of it. So we'll just give you an overview of how the risk all hangs together. And that's from raising risks through to linking them through to individual procedures, so we can start seeing how we conclude those risks. What we'll also look at is some of the review tool elements. Now, some of the review tool elements will sit within our checklist part of the process. So you'll be able to see how all of that ties in together as we work our way through the actual product. So rather than me just running through the information, I'm actually going to show you the information on screen. So I'm just going to go into an audit file that I've got set up, which we'll be able to see. So I've got my audit file set up, and what you'll be able to see when we come into an audit file is there's very little information as a starting point. We're going to build the file up as we work our way through some of these checklists and start adding content in as we start responding to this information. So the initial screen that we come to just gives us little data as a starting point, and we'll see across the top, this is our main navigation element, so this black bar. If I was to click on the CMA Partnerships Limited as my starting point, I'll be able to see that it gives us the ability to go through and start manipulating the operating name. This comes directly from Caseware Cloud. I can start changing the year-end date should I need to, and I can start changing the currency. So my reporting currency allows me to go through and select euro or US dollars. By default, we'll stick with the pound sterling. You see down the left-hand side, we do have a workflow available. Now the workflow, the first three elements will be automated for us. So this is when we get into the prepared by client and the client information request starting point. It will start pushing along the workflow for us. Everything else within this workflow will actually be a manual process. So when you're ready for the file or the planning to be reviewed, you can go through and manually move that along. At the bottom of this particular window, you can see we've got the ability to add a second reviewer. This will allow us to add in a second level of sign-off as far as the review is concerned. We also have the ability to lock the file down. The lockdown will just turn it into a read-only file, and that's just really performed at the end of the audit. If you need to make any adjustments to the file after a lockdown's been performed, that lockdown does become the unlock button. This will allow users to go through, unlock the file, make the relevant adjustments. However, you will need to put a reason in behind why you've unlocked the file. This is date and identified as well, so you'll have a stamp on there as to who's unlocked it and their response why. If I click on the save, I'll just close that window down. Now, when we're looking at the toolbar, what we'll be able to see is our main points of navigation. So the first element that we come to, or the first icon, is a little flag icon. That flag will allow me to go through and raise an issue. Now, we can raise issues at 3 different levels as we work our way through this file. We can raise issues on an engagement level, which is this particular flag. I can raise an issue at a document level, which is the flag that appears on hover on an individual document when we're on the document manager. Or alternatively, I can raise an issue on the individual procedure level when I'm within a document. So that will allow me to go through, and again, that flag will appear when I hover over it. So it's just trying to make sure that we remove all of the clutter from screen and you only see the options available when you're hovering over different areas. If I look at the I button, this will just allow me to go through, and I can see here we've got things like help. The help will take us to our UK knowledge base, and this will allow users to go through and access help such as the quick videos that we've got set up. So we have a fair number of quick videos already on the knowledge base, but this is always evolving, so there'll be more and more content that gets put up. If I move along to the documents tab will bring us through into our document manager. So this will allow us to go through and we can start seeing our document manager and the documents available at any one stage. Moving across, we then come to data. This is replacing the trial balance. So the data will allow us to go through and import a TB, and we can import from a number of different elements. So we can import from QuickBooks or Xero Online, or we can import from Excel. I'll run through that a little bit later. We then come to the adjustments tab, and this will allow us to view all of the adjustments within the file. The risks tab will allow us to go through and see all of the risks within the file, but it will also allow us to go through and generate a risk as well if we were in that particular screen and decide we needed to. Moving across, I then come to the issues. The issues won't allow me to go through and generate an issue. This will just give me a summary view. So I'll be able to view all of the issues and I'll be able to start filtering through the different views. So in this instance, I could change the type or I could change the status. And the final element on this particular window allows us to view the queries. So the queries is the prepared by clients element. So if I was to click on queries, I'll be able to see that I've got one query document within my document manager. That's my client information request. I can see the status of it and it's highlighted as draft. And then I can see how many questions we're going to raise for this particular client information request document. For me to be able to access the client information, I can either access it through the queries window just by clicking on the term client information request, or I can navigate back to my document manager and I can navigate to it from the actual document manager itself. So if I click onto the client's information request, what that will do is it will open up my client information request, and this will show up all of the questions that we've got predefined for you as part of the template. So what we're able to do from this particular window, we can scroll down and we can start reading through the questions that we're going to ask or the information that we're going to request from the client. So in this instance, a copy of your trial balance. So if I know it's as an Excel version, I can actually go through and change the wording if I needed to, just simply by clicking into it, typing away and saving that. Now, that's asking for an electronic copy of your trial balance. And what you'll be able to see just underneath the file upload is it will actually provide us with a destination. So we can preempt whereabouts these documents should go within our audit file. As a user, we'd be able to go through and redefine that just by clicking on the destination folder. This will allow me to define whereabouts I want this to sit on my document manager. So we'll be able to go through, and as you can see within taxation, any information that I receive regarding the taxation will actually go straight into my C folder on my desktop. There are certain questions that we don't need to ask. So for example, if I know this particular client doesn't have any investments, I can come down to the investment section, and on hover, I'll see a little visibility icon. This icon will allow me just to say I don't want to ask that particular question. And what I'll see on my navigation bar on the left-hand side is it will remove the investments option for me. So that question then gets removed from view. Should I wish to see it at any stage, I can always view all items, and this will show up my investments question, and I can reinstate it should I need to. As well as being able to change the text and turn questions off, we can also add questions, and we can decide whereabouts we want to add questions at any stage within the file by using the little blue plus. And again, it appears on hover just to remove some of the clutter. But if I decide I want to ask a particular question, in this instance, I'm going to ask, rather than for a particular file to be sent to me, I'm just going to ask a question that I can predefine my answers. So I'm going to select a pick list. And within the pick list, I'm going to have my financial reporting framework. And I'm going to put in my question in here. So I can see my question appearing. And I can go through and I can shape the questions. So I can define how I want these questions to be viewed by the client and how I want them to answer them. So in this instance, I've just given them a simple yes/no response. What I can also do is I can take this question and use it to assist me with responding to a question throughout the audit file. So I can go through and start linking this to a checklist. So if I select checklist, I can decide which checklist I want to link it to. Now, as my starting point, it's only going to give me those checklists that I can currently see on my document manager. If I knew that this was going to my planning checklist and the B11, I could change it from show hidden documents and select it from my complete range of documents that sit within my document manager. In this instance, I'm going to select preliminary tailoring. And from here, I can select which procedure do I want to respond to or use this to respond to. I can see here my financial reporting framework. If I click on save, that will now link it. So any response I get from the client will show up underneath that particular question. It won't go through and respond to the question within my audit file. It will just aid me with my response moving forward. Now, once I've actually gone through and tailored this, should I need to, I'm in a position to send this to my client. So if I select send in the top right-hand corner, I can go through and put in a query due date. So if I want this by Friday, I can define which of my contacts within Caseware Cloud for this particular entity I want to send my query to. And I can put in my email body. So, hi Matty, please respond ASAP. So I can put in my email body. If I wish to see that in a bit more detail, I can expand that just by dragging in the bottom right-hand corner. If I click on OK, what I'll be able to see is my status is no longer draft, it's now awaiting response. If I look into my queries section, I can now start seeing my information started to progress a little bit, and I can see my status is awaiting response, the due date, and who I sent it to. So if I wish to add it to or send it to more contacts for CMA partnerships, I can simply go through and select add contacts and pick out further contacts for this particular entity. What I'll also be able to see in the top left-hand corner is my workflow started to move across. So in this instance, it's now moved from not started to pre-planning sent. To look at it from the client's perspective, what we'll be able to see is the client will be given an email. So we can see a Caseware Cloud notification. It gives us the email body text that I've just typed in, and I can view the details. So from the contact's perspective, they'll be able to come in and access this client information request via Caseware Cloud. We can see the instructions, my newly typed text, and I'll also be able to filter the different levels of query. So I can see if there's anything that's awaiting response, anything that I've returned, or anything that I've completed, so I can get that back into view as well. So as the client, to respond to this particular query, all we need to do is go through and drag and drop, and there's my TB sitting within the file or within the query. I can add a comment, so please find attached, and I can comment on that as well. So we can start opening up a two-way conversation should we need to. Underneath it, I'm going to select out my yes, they still respond under FRS 102. Now we can highlight each individual question as awaiting response to responded, or alternatively, we can go through and mark everything as responded. So in this instance, I'm just going to mark this all as responded and close out of here. Now, as the auditor, I would have received an email to say a client's responded to a query. Click here to see. And what I'll be able to see from my document manager is that my client information request is highlighted as prepared by. So I can see the client information request has been highlighted as prepared by. I can also see my workflow started to move along again, so I can see the pre-planning has been returned. Looking at it from the queries tab, I'll also be able to see it's been responded. So I can start building up information from the queries tab as well if I needed to. Now I'm going to go into the client information request from the queries tab this time, and this will open up my client information request documents. And what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to review each individual element, so I can either click onto my TB to open it up so we can start viewing the trial balance, just to make sure it's the correct TB. Now the TB won't hit the document manager until we've accepted it to say it's the correct trial balance and it's the correct version. I can also see the description or the comment from the client, and then moving further down we can see the further information that they come from. Now just as the client has the ability to mark each individual question as responded, as the auditor we've got the ability to go through and accept each individual response or return it back to the contact. So if had this have been the wrong TB, I could have returned it to the contact. In this instance, rather than going through on a line by line basis, I'm just going to mark this entire document as complete and select continue. This will lock it down so the client can no longer change their responses at all. Puts it into a read-only format. Well, once I've actually marked it as complete, if I go back to my document manager, I can now see that my TB has hit my document manager. Now, because I know it's actually the correct document because I reviewed it, I can go through and left clicking into a particular area, I can sign that off so I can see that I've actually dealt that or prepared it. Now, once I've received that TB and it's hit my document manager, I'm going to go through and import my trial balance. So if I go into the data tab, I can see here that it opens up our import window. So the import window, as I said, we've got a number of different areas that we can import from. I mentioned the Excel, CSV, QuickBooks Online, Xero Online, but we also are able to import data directly from working papers. So if we're preparing the financial statements in working papers, we'll be able to push the TB up and it will come through pre-mapped into our TB for us. We have also got desktop accounting software. So anything that we currently import from as far as our desktop product is concerned will allow us to go through and import into our cloud product as well. In this instance, though, I'm going to select Excel or CSV, and I have two options here. Because I've requested the information that's sitting on my document manager, I can use this select file from engagement. If it was a trial balance that wasn't sitting on the document manager, we could browse to the file. So if it's saved onto the network anywhere, you can actually browse for that file manually. In this instance, I'm going to select from engagement, and I'm going to select my trial balance from client. All we need to do now is go through and label up what each column represents. And then I just need to remove any rows that aren't relevant as far as the import is concerned. Once that is in place, I'm just going to click on import. Now, while it doesn't look like there's any accounts found, if I select my assign accounts, what I'll be able to see is I've got a number of accounts there that I need to go through and just finish off. Had this been a rolled forward file, it would have retained my TB from last year, and it would just allow me to go through and assign any of these new accounts that have been created during this financial year. So if I select stock and finished goods, there's my stock for finished goods. What the software will do is it will go through and provide suggestions for the end user. So in this instance, I'm going to select my stocks finished goods for my current assets. I'm going to select other debtors. For other debtors, rather than looking through the suggestions, I'm going to start typing in other debtors, and what we'll see is it will actually gradually whittle down my list of account codes available, and I can start adding or start mapping that across relatively quickly. Now, to get rid of that other debtors, all I do is click on the cross and it removes it. Sales of exhibition stands, rest of the world, I'm going to go through, and then I've got my purchase of t-shirts. So once I've actually gone through and mapped my trial balance, I'll be able to view it in my accounts, and this will give me the ability to view those accounts that I've gone through and mapped, and all of the other accounts as well. Had we gone through the import again, what we'd be able to do is import transactions as well. And that transactions import will allow us to to drill down into individual accounts. So we'd be able to drill down into any of these accounts and see the breakdown of those particular balances. Users can go through and select further columns if they wish to. So if you wanted to see the variance or the prior year 2 balances, it's simply a case of making that selection from the drop down. What users will also be able to do is they'll be able to go through and filter the trial balance. So if they only wanted to see balances that are material, they could select the material balances, and that would go through and just strip out all of those balances that aren't classed as material. If we look at the financial group section, this will allow us to go through and just start looking at financial groups in their own right. So if I was looking at current assets, for example, this would give me all of the breakdown for the current assets, whether it's stocks or debtors. If I wanted to go further into my debtors due within 1 year, I'd then be able to see that I can start drilling down into each of those individual elements of the trade debtors. If I wish to go back, I can use the breadcrumb system at the very top to go back to my current assets, or alternatively, I can select the financial groups and this brings us back. So it's just a different way of being able to view the information that we've got available. Now that my TB is in place, I can see I've got a net income figure that shows up in the top right-hand corner. This net income figure is dynamic, so if we start posting journals, we'll start seeing that net income figure, profit or loss, will start increasing or decreasing as we post those journals. If I click back onto the documents, this will allow me to go through and start working on some of the preliminary tailoring. So with my TB in place, I'm going to open up the preliminary tailoring, and I can start seeing some of the questions that I need to shape my audit file as my starting point. So the first question, is this a new client? If I say no, it will just go out and strip out all of those questions relating to new clients. I can select whether I want built-in due diligence and the planning approach, so whether it's full planning or the free-form planning memorandum I wish to use. Just underneath that, my financial reporting framework, I can start seeing that this will actually guide me through my responses. So this is the information that I've asked the client, and I can see with the client's response, yes, we still report under FRS 102, therefore there's been no change. So I can use that to actually respond to the question. It won't respond to the question for us, it will just assist us with responding to it. If I go through and just answer the rest of these. Once I've answered these questions, what we'll be able to see in the top right-hand corner, I can actually mark this off as prepared. So I can show it up as prepared, and I'll be able to see my name and the date in which I've prepared this file. If I click on documents, it will then show up on my document manager. Now, to see more information about who's prepared the work, what we'll be able to see is a detailed view, and the detailed view will again go through and just provide the information as to who's completed the work at a particular stage. Now, once we've gone through and answered the preliminary tailoring questions, what you'll see is it will provide us with a much more complete document manager. So where we're looking at the document manager, what we'll be able to work our way through is the permanent file. If we don't need to work on a permanent file, we can just collapse it at this particular element or this particular stage. And if we come down into our planning section, we'll be able to see that we've got all of our planning documents there from the Mercia methodology. So if I was to go into the B11 planning checklist, what I'll be able to see from the B11 is we have all of the questions that currently sit within the word pack from Mercia. And to answer these questions, we set it up to try and make it as easy as possible for users to go through and respond to. So it should just be one-click responses as we work our way through here. What you'll be able to do from this particular window is navigate to other documents. So from here, we can see we've got the CB12 acceptance of appointment or reappointment. That will link us straight into that particular document. Alternatively, over on the right-hand side, you've got a little bit of a clearer, goes to the B12. If I was to click on that, I could then launch the B12 from this particular area. If I launch the B12 from here, it'll go straight into my B12 for me. But I'll be able to navigate back relatively quickly by using this pane here. So this pane here over on the left-hand side is a little document map, and this shows the documents that I've been in recently. So in this instance, I can jump straight back into my planning checklist by using my document map, and that will jump me straight back into my B11. So rather than having to go back into the documents document manager, I can start navigating back easily between two documents using my recent documents window. Now, users will be able to go through and start changing some of these questions that they're being asked. So I can go through and start editing some of the questions. So for example, if I wanted to edit a particular question, I can go through and start removing some of that content. I can add in further procedures if I wanted to. So I can start changing those procedures, add in new procedures, or alternatively, if there's particular procedures that I think actually aren't relevant for this particular audit file, I can go through and I can remove a procedure from view. So we can go through and start making a whole host of changes should we need to when we're working our way through this particular checklist. And this option is available on all of the checklists as you work your way through. Other items that are available within the checklist will be elements such as the guidance. So if I was to click on guidance, it gives you the objective for this particular document. And that's for the document as a whole. But you'll also see that there's guidance for individual procedures as well. So if I was to click on an individual procedure, I can start seeing information that relates to just this one procedure. So it will go through and aid the responses from the client just to give you a little bit of assistance. Clicking back on the light bulb just removes it from view. Now, working my way through here, I can start marking these as completed. But as a reviewer, if I wish to see what's changed within the file from the Mercia standard, if I click onto my review tools, this will allow me to go through and start viewing information that's actually being changed as far as the procedures are concerned. So what I'll be able to see over on the left-hand side is I've got my engagement changes, and I can see those questions that have been added, any questions where I've overridden the visibility, just decided I didn't want it in there, or any of the questions that I've actually changed as far as the body of the text is concerned. So in this instance, I've gone for remove the information for recurring assignments. So it gives us just a quick view, an overview of where we are as far as the changes that have been made to this particular document. Now I'm going to go into my B12 document at this stage. And if I go into my B12 document, it's one that I've already set up and I've gone through and answered. Just want to take you down using this document map. So we've got two different document maps, one for the actual documents on your document manager and one for jump to sections within a particular document. So if I was to look at my document map and jump down to my conclusion, I'll be able to see that my conclusions come through automatically for me. So all of my answers above have been responded to as no. If, however, there's something that I want to change on the file, I can change something by simply clearing the selection, and I can mark this as a change coming through. So when I'm looking at this particular change, I can see that my non-audit services will then prompt me for further questions relating to non-audit services. So I've got a number of questions there that I haven't answered because I haven't needed to in the past. So when I'm looking at my non-audit services, I can go through and select those services. I can then say if there was informed management. So it doesn't lack informed management. And let's have Lloyd as our informed management. And we can go through and just respond to the remaining questions. Now, by responding to these remaining questions and changing one of the responses from a no to a yes response, what I'll be able to see is my conclusion updates automatically. So I can see instantly that one or more of my answers have been answered as yes. Therefore, I need to go through into my B13. Now, the B13 was a document that wasn't available previously on my document manager, but will be now, if I go to my document manager, will be showing up for me to go through and actually respond to. Now I can see the reason why it's being hidden at any stage by clicking onto this visibility button. So if I click on the visibility button, this will give me a whole host of reasons as to why this particular document would be hidden or would be showing up. And so for this particular document, I can see that I've responded to as yes for a particular question, and that's why it's now showing. So if you think a document is showing and it shouldn't be, you'll always be able to have full transparency as to why that's showing up or why it isn't. Now, if I go back into the B13, I'll be able to see here that my preparation of accounts from trial balance and management accounts show up because that's how I've responded to the B12, and they're the non-audit services that I'd already selected. Now, if I go back to my document manager, something that I wanted to show was the option within the B12, just going back into here, the further options available within my review tools. So if I just open up the review tools, what I'll be able to see from the review tools in this instance is that I've got now a non-optimal answer, so there's a potential risk there. it will show up non-optimal answers, but I'll also be able to indicate any answers that have changed since I signed off that particular procedure. So I can see here that this particular procedure was signed off by me, but it has been changed since that sign-off was in place. Now, if you're happy that the question's been changed, you can remove the sign-off should you need to. Removing the tools, you can then re-sign off elements. So you've got the ability to go through sign-off questions and then add the sign-off back in again. Going back to my document manager, talking of the ability for non-optimal answers, if I open up my risk analysis and looked at my review tools, I would see here I've got a non-optimal answer. So if I scroll down, I can see my non-optimal answer. See that this is a wholly or in part new established business. So if I decided that I wanted to generate a risk at this particular stage, I can do that. And I can either jump into my risk screen or I can click on this little plus button. The plus button will allow me to create a new risk or allow me to create a new adjustment to my TV at any stage. I'm going to select risk for this instance. I'm going to select my title. So my title, I'll have new business venture. And the description I'm going to insert, I'm going to have my internet sales of t-shirts. What I need to do, and the only other compulsory element at this stage, is to go through and select the level of the risk. So whether it's a financial statement level risk or if it's an assertion level risk. So if I select assertion level risk, I can go through and select which areas does the risk relate to, whereabouts the risk was identified, and what my audit response would be. All I'm going to do for this element is select my status. I'm going to select the area that this relates to. So I'm going to select income, my financial statement area, and then I can select my assertions. So I'm going to have my completeness assertion and my accuracy assertion. I'm also going to go through and select save. So that will create a new risk for me, and down in the bottom right hand corner it will provide me with a little pop-up box that allows me to open that risk at this particular juncture. If I want to go through and view all of my risks, I click on the risk tab, and this will give me all of my risks, so I can see my revenue recognition, my management override risk. I can also see any assertions that are related to those risks. If I want to make any adjustments to the risk, I click onto that particular risk, and I can go through and make further changes should I need to. So the new internet sales of t-shirts, I can add further description or detail into here. If I want to go through and change the source of the risk or add the source of the risk, because I didn't do that at the time of creation, that's fine. We can go back and review this at any stage. Now, if I know what the actual source of the risk was, I can start typing that in. What this will do is it will start actually drilling down into that particular source reference for me. So I can select my risk analysis, and I can then go through and say which question it is that made me generate that risk. So I can go through and select my, is this wholly or in part newly established business? So we can go through and mark that as our where our risk was identified. Clicking on the text, that will jump me to that particular area, and it will flag up that a risk has been identified on this for this particular question. If we don't assign it to a question, we'll see the risk element showing up on the document as a whole. Now, once I've gone through and raised the risk, I'm going to run through into my my materiality documents. So if I open up my materiality documents, what I'll be able to see, so I've got materiality and it gives me some guidance, so the overall materiality and performance materiality. And if I scroll down, I'll be able to see my principal users that I can manually go through, add rows in and start defining who the principal users of the financial statements are if I wish to. I can add benchmarks in for some basis, so I can add my percentages coming through, and if I just add in 5%, so that's up to the user to go through and insert those. They're just there as a guidance, so it's still down to the end user's judgment to go through and put in their actual materiality level. So once I start typing in my materiality level, in the top right hand corner we'll see materiality appear. We can go through and insert a justification for our materiality level. And then underneath it, we've got our performance materiality. So the performance materiality I'm going to have as 80% of my overall materiality. And again, I can start seeing that appear. We have the same field for justification, so users can go through and insert their justification. And then we have our amounts below which misstatements are clearly trivial. And again, it's an input field, so I can go through and type that information in. Should you have any audit areas requiring their own levels of materiality, you have got the ability to go through and insert those on a section by section area. Now, the information that we've just inserted is on the planning balances. If, however, we wanted to take into account any of the adjustments, we can change that to revised. And what that will do is it will go through and I can see my planning stage, and then I can see the amounts coming through as at the initial or at the completion stage. Okay, now once I've got that information in place, what I'll be able to do is, from this particular document, if I go back to my document manager, what I'll be able to see is my work programs coming through. So I can start seeing my work programs have started to appear within my document manager. And these are all being driven by my materiality levels. So if I go into this particular area, I'll be able to see those work programs that are material. But if I didn't have a materiality basis at this particular stage, I can go through and add further work programs if I needed to. And this is using the B33 document. So the B33 document will show up any balances that are material, and it will turn those on for me. It'll go through and provide me with some assertions as well, so I can start changing those assertions should I need to. But I can add further information into here, so what my audit approach will be, which additional audit sections I wish to pull through, and how I'm going to go through and select my sampling. Now, if I didn't want to scroll up and down all the way throughout this particular area, I have got on the left-hand side the document map. So the document map will allow me to go through and I can start viewing information that appears on the document map. So if I was to come down to the investment section, for example, I can see my investment section hasn't actually been pulled through because it's not a material balance. If I click on yes, however, I can start driving that if I needed to. So by clicking on yes, that will go through and turn that on, and it will appear on my document manager. If I don't wish that to appear anymore, I just remove that selection and it will hide it for me. I'll set it to no. If I was to look at, say, income, for example, I can see that the income is a material balance, so therefore the audit program is required. I can see the assertions for my income section. I can make further adjustments to those assertions if I needed to. I can start plugging in things like my income approach. So my approach will be, and start inserting that information. Now, just underneath that, I can go through, and if I know that there's additional audit areas that I need, or audit sections within this audit area, I'm in the position to go through and start toggling those on as well. So if I wanted my non-audit services and analytical procedures, I've got the option to go through and switch them on. Just underneath that, I can then start inserting my sampling plans as well. So I can put in my sample. Moving further down the line in the future, we will be looking to include the sample size calculator and a sample selector, but that's an adjustment that we're looking to add in a few months' time. Now, once I've got this in place, I can start typing in information. We have the jump to available for my detailed audit approach, and so I can jump to my H section and I can see in here my income. And what I'll be able to see from my income section is I've got my overall audit plan, approach and plan. So I can see here my assertions coming through. I can see my audit approach and which additional sections or audit program sections I've selected. So I can see in this instance C and D coming through. I can see my sampling, just inserted random. If I scroll down a little bit, I'll be able to see that section C, this section is required because of my response in the B33. Now again, because it shows up with blue text, it is a link back into the B33, so I can jump back into there if it doesn't show in my recent documents listing. Now for me to go through and show up which questions I want to pull through, I need to go through and show up all of my hidden items. So if I show up my hidden items, I'll be in a position to see those audit sections that I haven't switched on for this particular audit area, but I can see it's not relevant, so I'm just going to collapse that area. And then I can pick out which test I want to switch on for this, this particular one. So in this instance, I'm going to go through and switch on a test using the visibility icon. That will go through and allow me to switch that on. Keep coming down, I can go through and switch on further questions. Now, once I've got that in place, if I switch off the hidden items, I'll be able to see those tests coming through. So I can start seeing my sales for section D. That's the particular question that I've switched on. I can also see the question that I've switched on for section C as well, coming through into my audit file. What I'll also be able to do, rather than looking at all of the tests in one go, if I was only interested in selecting the individual assertions, I can select my completion assertion, for example, and that would show up just those tests that have the assertion for completion showing up. So I can start tailoring and filtering my views as I work my way through here. Within each work program, we have the procedures section. So this is using Mercia's work programs. But we'll also have individual sections for the analysis. So I can start tailoring or viewing a lead sheet from this particular window. But I'll also be able to see not just a lead sheet, but some graphical representation as well. And this will give us things like our turnover and the accounts receivable, how our materiality and performance materiality sits with that as well. But we can start seeing some ratios coming through. Hovering over certain areas will actually give us how that's being calculated. What we'll also have is the ability to see some useful ratios kicking in. So ratios for receivables or turnover, my days in debtors. I can start hovering over it and it gives me a breakdown of how these are actually made up and what they're actually representing. Users will be able to go through and add further comment onto here as well. So you can add some commentary as you work your way through these particular window sheets. If there's one particular sheet that I wanted to stand out, I can pop it out, and what that will do is it will give me a full width of my window, so we can start changing how this is looking. But users will have the ability to toggle what information they see on this particular area, and they can start switching off, say, turnover, for example, and start removing some rows in here. You can always add rows back in. Alternatively, you can revert to the default, so I can reset it back. So there's a number of different options here for people to go through and toggle how they're viewing that information. If I move on to the risks tab, the risks tab will give me a breakdown of all of the risks that are associated, so I can see my revenue recognition and new business venture, but in a constellation form. So this constellation form just gives us a breakdown of how it sits with our financial statement areas. So had I had drilled down further into income, it would have given me what level of income that this actually risk relates to. And so we can start seeing a build up and a bigger picture of how this ties in the financial statement area to the risk. Again, moving forward, and when it becomes more prevalent, we'll be adding the controls dialog in here as well. And so you'll be able to see how the risk, the financial statement area, and the controls will relate to each other. This risks area allows us just as a quick shortcut. We can click onto any of these risks and it will jump us into that risk on the risk dialog. And then finally, what we'll be able to see is our risk assessment. So the risk assessment, if I was to go back into my risks, is coming from this assessment window. So when I'm looking at this particular assessment, what I'll be able to see is if I open up my income section, I'll be able to see the risks that I've got highlighted in here. So my new business venture, the one that we created earlier, and the actual level of the risk. So I've got my inherent, control risk, and risk of material misstatement. By making an adjustment in here, what we'll be able to see is the risk of material misstatement will pull through automatically. Users can go through and make an adjustment to the level should they need to. Just by left clicking removes that level of risk. Now, if I go back into my document manager, what we'll be able to look at is we have analysis set up for each individual work program, but the B22 will actually provide a preliminary analytical review for you. So if I select preliminary analytical review, it gives us a starting point for our analytical review. But if we go into the analysis tab in this instance, what this will do is it will give us a breakdown of our different ratios and relationships. So we can start seeing the information laid out in a graphical format, or we can see it laid out in some ratio format. Again, all of this information we can go through and adapt. Now, if it was something that you wanted to provide your users, all of the documentation can be saved to the cloud. So for example, I can just left click and save to cloud. And what this will do is it will allow me to start sharing this information with my clients without having to send them a PDF. It puts a copy of the document onto the the cloud environment, and users will be able to share this with their contacts so they can just log on to the cloud portal. You can restrict the amount of information that they see as you work your way through here. If I go back into the risk section, earlier we went through the process of the actual where the risk was identified. Now we've got our risk response. So in the risk response, I'm going to go through and have my sales section. Oops. Help if I typed in income section. This will go through and find my income and debtors, my work program and lead sheet. So I can start putting my audit response into that particular, or relate it to that particular lead sheet. But then I'm going to go through and I'm just going to relate it to the individual tests. So I can match up more than one test at any one time, and I'll be able to see whereabouts this risk is going to be mitigated. As with the identifying of the risk, we have got the jump to, and this will jump us into that particular document, and I'll be able to see showing up on here where we've got the risk showing. Oops. If I just jump back into here. So we'll be able to see where we've got that particular risk, and if I was to click on it, we'll be able to see that risk appearing. If I go back into my document manager, what we've got at this stage working our way through here is we can start seeing that our permanent file section and planning and our work program show up, but we don't have a completion section at this stage. Now for the completion section to start appearing, I need to go into my planning checklist. And at the very foot of my planning checklist, I do have the ability to go through and set this to yes. So basically what we've done is we've hidden the completion section until we've gone through and tailored all of the work programs and those planning documents. Once that's been set, if I come back to my document manager, what I'll be able to see from my document manager is I've got this completion section appearing. So our completion section will appear, but only after we've said, yes, we've done everything that the B11 requires us to. Now, when we're looking at the completion section, if I go into any of these, it's a setup as in the same manner as the planning checklist, really. It allows us to go through, and with those one-click responses, we can start putting in our responses. If we have any supporting documentation that we want to cross-reference to, these annotation fields will allow us to go through and start cross-referencing to particular third-party documentation, or if we've got any supporting documentation such as Excel spreadsheets. And this will allow us to select the actual purpose, so it goes to or comes from, and then we can select our documents from the document manager. And as you can see, we can then see it comes from the trial balance. What we also have on our completion section is the ability to see our summary of misstatements. So if I was to look at our summary of misstatements, what I've got coming through is I've got just a quick glance of where we sit with regards to those journals that we've posted for the unrecorded or uncorrected journals. So I can see in this instance that my journals do surpass my performance materiality and my overall materiality. So I can start seeing at a glance if I need to start making any adjustments, working my way through here. Now to see those adjustments, I'm going to scroll down and I can see the adjustments in a table format that will allow me to see my factual, projected, or judgmental. Alternatively, I could click on the Adjustments tab. And this Adjustments tab will open up and it will show me all of those adjustments that I've made within this audit file. So I can see I'm missing sales invoices, my stock adjustments have come in. All of these adjustments that we've inserted, we can go through and we can export them. So should you wish to export them to a CSV or provide them to your clients, you've got the ability to export to CSV or export to a PDF document. You can then provide that information back to your client. If I go back to my A27, what I'll also be able to do from the A27 is I can view the individual journal types from here as well. So I can click onto the journal and I can start making adjustments from this particular window. So if I wanted to change my stocks for raw materials, if I needed to actually amend this, if I click on the edit button for this particular journal type, I can change the type from unrecorded projected to normal. It will show up what it was originally set up as, so I can see my original misstatement was set as projected. And if I click on save, that will push the journal from my projected column into my total corrected column. It will also go through and update my graphical representation, and I can start seeing now those areas that I've actually adjusted compared to those areas that I'm still setting as uncorrected and proposed. That really summarizes everything that I wanted to take users through as far as an overview of the actual product is concerned. So as I said, you have got the ability to go through and lock the files down. So if I was to select lockdown, if I say yes to that, this then becomes a read-only version of the file. So if I was to open up things on here, what it will do is it will remove the ability for me to make any adjustments on this particular file. I can see in the top left-hand corner that the workflow is now changed to a padlock. Should I wish to change that, I've got the ability to unlock. So I can see that my lockdown now becomes unlock, and I can start putting in my reason as to why I want to unlock this engagement. The rolling forward of the file will also allow us to go through and roll files forward. And that's actually done through Caseware Collaborate or Caseware Cloud. So I can go through into my Caseware Cloud, and what this will allow me to do is I can select which file I want to roll forward, and I've got the option for create next period's file. If I select create next period's file, it will allow me to go through and put in the following year that I want this one to relate to. So in this instance, I could have this as CMA 2021, and which file I want to roll the information forward from. If I select save, this will allow me to go through and start defining which elements I want to pull through from last year's file into this particular file. So I'll have the ability to go through and retain certain responses if I want to, retain certain documents if I want to on my document manager. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to with it as far as this file is concerned. On this particular rolled forward file, can you see you've got the ability there to accept this document into the current year file, or I can remove it from the current year file. If I open up my preliminary tailoring, I've also got the ability to save last year's responses should I want to. And that will be available on all of the documents as you work your way through here. If you want to switch that off, you have got the ability to remove the carry forward information. So that covers everything that I wanted to as far as the audit software was concerned. What I just want to take you through now, just before I pass over back to Tom, is the actual ability to access the UK company audit. So it is a cloud-only product. There's no offline tools or anything available. And to purchase it, if you contact caseware.co.uk, email them. The current price is £45 per user per month. Any new users to the cloud will have an additional £10 per month that they'll need to pay, but that gives you all of the file storage that you need. It will also provide you with a number of free collaboration tools and a number of different free elements available through the cloud, plus the update and the maintenance of the security and the like. Anyone who's currently using Caseware, work in papers and has SmartSync, that £10 is part of the SmartSync license, and so you won't need to pay that. That covers everything that I wanted to cover, so I'm going to hand back to Tom to wrap up.
Thanks very much, Matt. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the question field now, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We can also include those in the Q&A document. So when we upload the recording of the webinar to the knowledge base, you'll see the Q&A document on there as well with the answers for your reference. It's also worth mentioning that we've got the Getting Started guide on the knowledge base, just to give you a top-level overview of how to get started with the Cloud Audit template. And we've got lots of other resources. So we have some quick vids and knowledge base articles on there. And we've also got a wide range of quick videos available for you to watch on our Caseware Client Services YouTube channel as well. Looking ahead, we've got a couple of webinars coming up in the next few weeks. So if you'd like to view the agendas for those and to register to attend, just visit the events page of our website, caseware.co.uk. So that brings us to the end of the broadcast. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed the webinar and found it useful. We'd very much appreciate it if you could complete the feedback form, and if you have any ideas for future content, please let us know and we'll look to include it in a future webinar. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.